Hello all, the Caretaker here. This Graveyard Show Classic podcast comes to you from September 10th, 2009. And what you're about to hear is the show in its original unedited version. Now, my guest for this show was Paul Solet, the writer-director of the film Grace. On this program, we're going to talk about the film, as well as some of the stories about people fainting at some screenings of the film as well. Now, what makes this podcast special is that I announced on the program that I was stepping away from the show and handing the reins over to Rich Peterson from Madison Horror. Rich was going to produce and host the show during my absence while I was tending to family health matters. Listening back on this program, it reminded me of a few things. Why I don't do this new version of the show on a weekly basis anymore. How stressed and exhausted I sounded while recording the show. And the most important thing is something that I always carry with me is that family always comes first. It's an important part of the Graveyard Show podcast history, and I thought you would enjoy hearing it in its full version. So here it is, Graveyard Show Podcast 36 from September 10th, 2009. I hope you enjoy it.
Good evening, friends of the undead. I am the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp. Freak Show!
And I am the Diva of Dismemberment, Mistress of the Blade, June the Meat Cleaver, from the Bordello of Horror.
You're getting your freak on with the Caretaker on the Graveyard Show.
Step into the graveyard with the Caretaker at graveyardshow.com. That is graveyardshow.com.
Podcast number 36, September 10th, 2009.
Hi, this is Paul Solet, director of the film Grace, and you are listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. So as you heard at the top of the show, we will be graced by the presence of director Paul Solet, who is the director of the film Grace, which will be coming out on DVD next week, Tuesday the 15th. Paul and I met back in April at Fango, LA, and talked about coming on the show, and he was nice enough to take the time to do so. So in a little bit, you will be hearing from Paul Solet, director of the film Grace. Now, I'm going to break format a little bit here. I know there are some of you out there that have heard the news regarding myself and the show, which I will get into in just a second. But before I do that, I do want to hit some friends' websites and events that are going on. First of all, of course, I have to start with Rich Peterson up in the Bordello of Horror, the Madison Horror Film Festival, which will be coming to, Madison, Wisconsin, on October 3rd and 4th. You can check out his website, which is madisonhorror.com. Some of the guests that will be up there for the film festival will be Stuart Gordon, Debbie Rochon, Elska McCain, Scarlett Salem, Bill Rebane. Lots of movies to be watched. A great weekend. The second annual Madison Horror Film Festival, October 3rd and 4th. Then, which you will hear a promo for this after the show, but of course, our friend Shannon Lark over at the Chainsaw Mafia, her festival, Viscera. She's accepting submissions for Viscera to December 31st of this year. So if you're a woman filmmaker and you would like to submit your film to Viscera, go to thechainsawmafia.com to find out more information about how you can submit your film, and you can get information there. Then, of course, the Queen of San Francisco horror, or Queen of Bay Area horror. I'll have to ask her which one she'd prefer. Rainey Young from Last Doorway Productions. Two things. One, her documentary on women in horror was supposed to be out in August. It has been delayed to October. It will definitely be out in October. She's currently filming wraps for the documentary. It will be out in October, so please keep your eyes open for it. She's also going to be doing Zombie Prom on October 17th in San Francisco. That is a Saturday, so certainly to follow Raina and the show. It's Last Doorway Production, or Productions, lastdoorwayproductions.com, lastdoorwayproductions.com. Also, Wildclaw Theater is doing Death Scribe 2009. To find out more about that, go to wildclawtheater, theatre.com for details. There are a series of horror radio plays that I believe there are 5 of them that will be performed in October, live with live Foley, all kinds of stuff. They're kind of going old school with it, so check it out. That's wildclawtheater.com. And if you live in Los Angeles and you want to stay on top of all the happenings that's going on in the LA area regarding horror, whether it's movies, shows, events, visit our friend Ray McDermott at filmradar.com. That's filmradar.com. Ray is the writer of the horror blog for Film Radar and, of course, contributor here at the Graveyard Show podcast. Okay, so let's get to Graveyard Show news. So it's been quite a week, to say the least. It's been a little hectic. Essentially, for those of you that may have either found out by looking at today's website, or maybe you're just downloading this from iTunes and you don't know. Essentially, I will be stepping aside as your host of the Graveyard Show podcast for a while. I need to do so because there's family illness that has gotten extremely serious, and I need to attend to matters. It's a little difficult to justify taking the time to do a podcast and putting a podcast together while family members going through a really tough time. So I have chosen to step aside as your host of the Graveyard Show podcast. The original plan was that the Graveyard Show was going to close its doors for a while, just kind of lay dormant. But someone has taken the interest in keeping the show alive and going, which I'm extremely flattered that this individual has chosen to do so. It is flattering, to say the least. The individual who will be taking over and running things here while I'm away is my friend Rich Peterson up at MadisonHorror.com. And, Rich has nothing but time on his hands. I mean, between, doing the Madison Horror Film Festival, booking guests and getting them out there and screening films, and doing Bordello of Horror, and, managing all the talent there. I'm sure he has nothing but time to sit back and do the show. So I'm extremely thankful and flattered that Rich has offered to run things while I'm gone. He believes in the show, and he will keep the integrity of the show. I have no fear of that. I'm really thrilled that he's decided to do so. I can't thank him enough. It really does mean a lot to me. This year's just been a crazy year. Of course, as I start the podcast this year, it's just been an insane year. My wife and I have been dealing with a lot of family illness, especially over these last few months. And like I said, I just need to step aside for a while and deal with real life. I'm not sure how long I'll be gone. It could be a couple of weeks, it could be a couple of months, it could be a year. I honestly don't know. And I don't want to put a time limit on it because, number one, that's not fair to me and my family to just kind of say, yeah, I'll be back on this date, no problem. that would put a lot of there'd be a lot of stress on me, and of course my family. I don't want to have to step aside if I'm needed at that point in time. So blindly just picking a date is not going to happen. The other thing is that's not fair to you guys out there. It's not fair to you, the listener. It's not fair to Rich to just say, I'll be back on this date, and then if I'm not, you guys, are expecting me to be back, or if Rich has, made plans around that time, and then just kind of go, nope, can't do it. It's just unfair to everybody involved. So I am not putting a stamp on when I will be back. I will be back. I can tell you that right now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm stepping aside for a while, but the show will continue. So please come back next week. I will get into, after the interview with Paul, I'll get into what you can expect from the Graveyard Show starting next week. We'll get into more in just a little bit, because as you can hear in the background, you see the gravediggers wait for no one, especially a lame duck host. They're digging that grave. Of course, as you know, there's only one reason why they're doing so. It's time to hear from our guest, Paul Solet, director of the film Grace. Enjoy.
Paul Solet is the director of the film Grace, which is set to be released on DVD this coming Tuesday, September 15th. Paul is certainly no stranger to success. His 2005 short film, Means to an End, won several awards for Best Short Horror Film, including one from Fangoria magazine, and it also appeared on the DVD entitled Blood Drive 2. Tony Timpone has said that Solet is, quote, a horror talent to watch, unquote. Rue Morgue magazine said, quote, Solet is undoubtedly destined to become a household name in the genre, unquote. And Eli Roth has said that Paul's work, quote, makes Cabin Fever look like a Disney movie, unquote. And now the director joins me here in the Graveyard. Paul, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So, how are you feeling now that the DVD is getting ready to be released?
Good, man. It's exciting. We succeeded in pulling off a theatrical for the film, and so now it's all sort of gravy,
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about your film. It certainly has gotten a lot of buzz at Sundance this year. Producer Adam Green emailed the website Shock to You Drop, and he said the following in that email, quote, 2 faints, one outside and one in the lobby. Egyptian theater owner confirmed that in 10 years it's the first time it's happened. Amazing screening, unquote. What was it like to create that kind of effect on your audience?
It was hugely gratifying. I mean, there's no sort of greater sign of success for a genre film than getting under your audience's skin enough to cause them to lose consciousness. I mean, when it first happened, I was actually concerned, because I was sort of, there was this sort of sense that it might set up the wrong expectations for the film. I mean, as soon as you hear that, you start thinking about movies like Saw, that are really going to deliver some serious gore, and Grace doesn't do that. Grace is not a movie that will, the guys that have passed out have sworn up and down that they're big horror fans. I mean, to my thinking, this is not the sort of movie that's going to get me to pass out. I mean, I don't know that there's a movie that's going to get me to pass out, but initially there was some concern about what kind of expectations it would cause. But in the end, it really just proved to be a great jumping-off place to talk about the film and what it was about, and the way it operates, not just viscerally. I mean, it's clearly operating viscerally if it's making people lose consciousness, but it really is a film that is operating, on some other levels as well. It works intellectually and it works emotionally, and not to get too precious, but the way the film stays with people sort of seems to work almost spiritually. People keep on talking about the film, and they're really very strongly affected by the film. So, and of course, in a situation like Sundance, having two people pass out at your movies is a publicists were delighted, to field day for them. They're like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think people have passed out at movies at Sundance before. I think that somebody passed out in Reservoir Dogs, but no one has passed. There's never been two people that have passed out, and it's actually not an isolated incident. We had another screening at USC where a third kid passed out, and he actually hurt himself pretty bad. He split his chin open and he broke 2 fingers. So that was sort of that sort of sucked, just because
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
it's a nice kid.
Sure.
Hurt himself. He was a good sport about it.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it takes me back to the days of like Exorcist. I mean, where people were going to, they were seeing the movie in the theaters, and you were hearing about, news reports about people that were, had to go into the lobby and calm down because it was so disturbing. I mean, it's not often really that a movie, especially a horror movie, really does that to an audience.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly had our share of films lately that have delivered the goods with gore, but I think really for a genre film to be firing on all cylinders, it needs to do just what any other film needs to do, which is to really create a universe that is consistent and authentic enough that the audience cannot escape.
Yeah.
And if you've done that, and you've given them characters that they that they have to identify with, and then you put those characters in the situations that only a genre arena allows you to put them in, then you can really do some damage. And then it's not just a gut punch; it's a soul punch, and you get to really kick people's souls around the room hours.
Yeah. Now, is there any sort of fear, as the director of this film, is there any sort of fear that like this sort of hype, this news coverage of people, passing out, do you think that when filmgoers get to see this film that it might not live up to the hype, or do you think that there's just enough hype behind your movie where you think people will be interested in the movie and enjoy it without going, wow, there was too much hype about this film?
I think we're sure to get some backlash. I mean, unless the film makes you pass out, it's not going to live up to its hype. So, it's like I said, there are not torrents of blood in this movie. There are not, there are some jump scares, that work pretty well, but that's really not the kind of movie it is. It's a movie that, the reason people are passing out, it's much more of a sort of, my theory is that it has nothing to do with blood. It has to do with, there's a very sort of deliberate, sort of almost kind of trance-inducing type of a pacing, and type of an atmosphere that's created in the film. And I think people that are sort of, folks that are, they can slip into sort of a trance state easier than others. I think those are the people that are being affected.
Yeah.
That's just my theory. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, inevitably, you're already starting to see it. I mean, literally for like 9 months, we had nothing but not just good reviews, but literally glowing reviews from everybody. And you're starting to see reviews that are saying things like, certainly one of the best genre films in the last 10 years, but if you're looking for a movie like The Exorcist, this isn't it. It's like, well, that's a hugely flattering review if you sort of reframe it and look at what it's saying.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's all about hype. It's like we never proclaimed to be The Exorcist. I mean, we shot this movie in 17 9.5-hour days. The Exorcist had a budget, I don't know, 75 or 100 times ours. They were shooting for years in custom-made freezers, to produce this is like, we're doing 1 to 3 takes in Regina, Saskatchewan. So to be mentioned in the same breath with The Exorcist is sort of, it's like just immensely flattering, I think, horror fans it's tough, there's a great deal of unity here, and when we unite, we have a tremendous amount of power. you know, in a way that the traditional dramatic community just does not have, and certainly like, you know, in the comedy world, like people are trying to one up each other with jokes. You know, here we sort of come together, you know, and not just the filmmakers, but the people that run sites and the fans, the people that buy the DVDs and the people that blog about them. And, you know, when we find something that really turns us on, we have the power to really get behind it. At the same time, you always have a sort of, there's always sort of the, you know, the wild, wild west sort of nastiness that comes out in the community of the internet, which is like largely where we sort of work out what we think of movies, you know? And I think, you know, hype is a bitch. Hype can be a real bitch, you know, that can be tough. Hype can ruin films, you know. I mean, I have seen films this year, you know, that numerous people, you know, for whatever reason I didn't get to see, you know, there was one film in particular that I'm thinking of, I didn't get to see it for a long time, and tons of people, you know, told me about it, and it's amazing, and these are people I really respect, and I eventually saw the film, and, you know, and it's a good film, but the hype, you know, like I was waiting for something more. So next time I see that film, I'm sure that I'm gonna, you know, I'm sure that it will really blow my hair back. But expectations are tough. I mean, I don't know though, you know, I mean, it really is sort of a luxury problem. You know, if it gets you to sit down and watch the movie, you know, I think, I mean, I was really sort of blessed enough with the team that I have around me to sort of the level of craftsmanship on this film is one that, you know, the toughest critic is not gonna have anything negative to say about, you know. So, I mean, basically, at the end of the day, you know, all I can do is all I can do, you know, and this is sort of, we do the footwork and the rest is the results. You know, the footwork doesn't end when you wrap, you know. Like, I mean, when I made for life, you know, like this is, you know, you really, I mean, this is my baby. I travel with this, I've traveled all around the world with this film and seen it with, you know, like 80 different audiences, you know, and it plays wonderfully, you know. I mean, I really do believe in the film. I believe in the team that made the film, and, you know, I mean, is it gonna make you pass out? I doubt it, you know. Will it leave you thinking? I think probably so.
Well, we've talked about the hype, we've talked about the reaction. Why don't we get into what the movie's about? And I'm sure you haven't had to describe what your movie's about to anybody else but this show. I'm sure it's the first time you'll have to give the description of the movie. But for those out there that may not know what the film Grace is about, what can you tell us the storyline is?
Well, it's a genre film. It's a horror film, and it's sort of in the, probably people have put it in the subgenre of body horror, sort of, you know, Cronenberg type subgenre wherein the terror comes from within. And what Grace is about, it's about a woman who's been trying to get pregnant for a long time to no avail, and she's finally 8.5 months pregnant and determined to have a natural birth. And you know, the traditional medical community has failed her, and she's going to do this naturally, and then she loses her child in an accident, and she makes a decision to carry to term and deliver naturally anyway. So she carries this dead child to term, and when she delivers, you know, sure enough, the child is not alive. And you know, she asks for a moment alone with the baby. Reluctantly, the midwife complies. When the midwife comes back into the room, the baby is nursing. And, you know, it's a miracle, but it is a miracle that we quickly learn has grave and sinister consequence.
Pretty heavy subject matter, to say the least. How did you come up with the storyline?
The story just comes from, you know, the medical science behind the story. I mean, it's just, I was having a conversation and talking about, you know, this idea that if you're pregnant and you lose your child and labor is not induced, you can carry a baby to term, and that this is a decision that women make much more frequently than we talk about, you know, in polite company. To me, even as a man, it was just such a powerful little kernel of horror that it was, you know, it was an obvious jumping off place for a genre script. I mean, as a horror fan, you know, like since I was a little boy, you know, I have a harder and harder time getting disturbed by stuff. Mm-hmm. And so when I find an idea that really gets under my skin, I really do jump on it. And this is one of those things.
Now, it's coming out on DVD, obviously, as a feature film, but originally this was a short, correct?
Originally, it was a feature-length script, and people wanted to option the script and buy the script. They didn't want to let me direct it because I hadn't done a feature before. And I really could have used the money, but I walked. And you know, made a decision. You know, I mean, I believed in the story enough that I wanted to see it done right. And so, you know, I decided that, you know, I mean, it's sort of my responsibility to prove to financiers that I have the chops to direct it as well. So I distilled the key beats in the first act of the feature into a 6-minute pitch film, and then raised the money to shoot that, you know, right. Shot that on 35. We had a really good cast and a really good crew, and you know, the idea was to a very different purpose than the feature. You know, its purpose was to hit you in the gut and leave you needing to know what happens in the rest of this movie. You know, whereas the feature is a much more slow burn, atmospheric head.
So did you make the short more like a cliffhanger? Or how did you wind up shooting it? I mean, as far as story goes, without obviously giving away the plot or giving away.
Well, like I said, basically, you know, in the synopsis I just gave you of the feature, you know, in the sort of the short elevator pitch of the feature, I basically give you the perspective of the feature, which is, you know, woman loses her child in an accident, she carries a term. When she delivers, the baby comes back to life. Those are the key beats in the short, and those are the key beats in the first act. So, you know, it's a self-contained. It's not a trailer. It's a self-contained story. The short, with a beginning and a middle and an end, and that was always the intention. You know, was to really show not just what you can do stylistically or logistically, but that you have, you know, that you can work with actors and that you can deal with pacing, and that you can create a beginning and a middle and an end, and that you have some grasp of structure and and timing and story rhythm. So that was sort of the idea behind the short.
Was there any moment when you were doing this that maybe you thought, maybe I should have sold the script when I had the chance? Did you ever feel like it was a mistake, or did you just say, I'm doing it and that's it, and whatever happens, happens?
I think, yeah. I mean, you know, like, anytime you need money, it feels like, you know, maybe I should have taken that money. But, you know, I mean, I am, like, I've been lucky enough to be able to sort of watch other people go through this journey before me, and you know, and have some sort of advisors, you know, from whom to seek guidance in these sorts of issues. So, you know, I mean, in the process of making that decision to walk and do the, you know, do the short and do the, eventually, you know, just commit to doing the feature myself. In the process of doing that, you know, I learned a lot, and I received counsel, you know, from folks I really trusted. So, you know,
you're probably going to go down. You're probably going to go down in as a legend. I mean, for this story about, you know, being offered money to sell the script, to, you know, holding out, making the movie as a short, as a trailer for the film, or, you know, as a teaser for the feature, and now, you know, having it done and getting a career from that. I mean, that's you know, that takes chops, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's. Thank you. I mean, I think really the two things that I've been taught to believe in, you know, in the school of filmmaking that I come from is hard work and faith. You know, those are the only things that you have. Those are your luxuries. You know, you can, any entitlement issues that you have, are going to be really tough. Like if I see something like that cropping up, I really do my best to jettison it from my attitude and replace it with just sort of the practicalities of hard work.
Sure.
Sure. Just footwork after footwork, and then once you've made a decision, you sort of commit to it,
So now you go out, you make the short, you go back, you cut it. What do you do with it?
The short, I basically entered in a bunch of festivals, you get it around as much as you can, it's another case of footwork, so it's like, you don't just get it into festivals, you figure out, what are the right festivals for you, and then you try to figure out a way to get to the ones that seem like they might hold some opportunities for relationships, and you get out and you start talking to people about the movie, and at every festival, like when you have a short, it's not like you have a publicist, like you're your own publicist. I mean, I would go to these festivals and these conventions, and I would strap a dead baby prop and a baby joint and cover myself in blood and run around handing out postcards and, trying to pack people in seats. And by doing that, like we could take, a middle of the day slot at, the Fangoria, Weekend of Horrors in Burbank in 2006 and pack the place. I mean, we had like, hundreds of people in there to watch a short film, like a 5-minute short film, and you've got like, Rob Zombie walking around and all this stuff happening, and, it's not, it's a combination of this sort of like willingness to do a little bit of William Castle-esque sort of blustering promotion and to be able to sort of deliver something other than spectacle and sleight of hand if people show up, So it did some festivals and it did some conventions and got the attention of Adam Green, who was doing the same circuit with Hatchet at the time. And he kept seeing me at these conventions, and I'm running around with that baby Bjorn, doing all these stunts and stuff, and eventually, people kept telling him about the short. He just didn't want anything to do with it. He get pretty busy on these things, and it's just sort of one more thing to do, to watch every little thing and figure everything out. And I guess he but he finally caved in and went in to watch it, and he really liked it. And our friends at the website Icons of Fright, Jay Alvino and Rob Galuzzo, Jay actually did, it's a very talented artist, he did the effects in short, and Jay had read the feature and, had been with the project for a long time and brought the feature to Adam Green and Adam read it and loved it, and we met and we're both from back east, and the rest is sort of history.
I mean, it had to have been gratifying, to say the least, to know that taking the gamble paid off. I mean, it must have just been exhilarating to know that you were going to be going into production on this as a feature film.
Oh yeah, it was totally cool. I mean, saying the rest is history is an oversimplification. Like Adam optioned the script, and it still took us another 1.5 years to get the money. It took us it's still a very long road, and a number of times we sort of had the money, didn't have the money, had the money, didn't have the money, had the money, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And eventually, it wasn't until this guy Mark Ward at Anchor Bay usually acquires films, but Mark championed this film so much, he loved the script so much that he convinced Anchor Bay to put up half the money, and once Anchor Bay was on board, it became a very real thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Can you discuss, as a filmmaker, especially for all the younger filmmakers out there or future filmmakers out there that have not gotten a taste of that yet, the emotional roller coaster that is pre-production in terms of, I mean, here you said, it took you guys 1.5 years, to get the money together with the money's there, the money's not there, and I mean, you're filling this time in, you're setting your sights on making this movie, but reality is that you still have to live, you still have to pay rent. How did you fill that time, and how did you keep yourself focused on not getting down on yourself when the moments hit the low?
It's a really good question. Footwork is the answer. Like, you fill in all the blanks with footwork. It's like you have if you focus on the terror and the uncertainty and the unlikely odds, you will just become overwhelmed and shrivel up and die, and basically become paralyzed. And that's not an option. So, I believed in the script enough that I believed that we were going to make the movie, and it became, just again and again, recommitting and making the decision every single day to commit to putting the time in to do footwork and sort of pre-production, and storyboarding and shot listing and, in really, really doing my due diligence to select the right department heads, meet with them and develop a shorthand with them and create sort of a multimedia manifesto for them to use once we did start pre-production. And, it's definitely a roller coaster. I mean, I had been lucky enough to have a very steady production job before that at MTV for like a year or 9 months. So that enabled, that allowed me to rack up basically, months and months of unemployment. So I collected it,
Yeah.
And even then it's sort of like you're still going to be reliant on family friends to help you along and when it needs, and just trust that you're going to be able to, in the end, get everybody back that's helped you out along the way, and make good on everyone's sort of investment in you and your time and their time,
Mm-hmm. So we now flash forward to a year and a half later. You have the money, you're in pre-production, it's time to cast the role of Madeline. Was there any concern that you might not find the right actress for that part?
Yeah, I mean, that concern usually is sort of studio level concern. It's sort of, there's a lot of fear tied up in casting, and casting can sort of get a movie made or not made. And the people that were sort of on the approved list for us, okay, we'll give you the money if you get, there were some, they were very, 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 very big name actresses, and we've got this sort of totally unique, strange little moody, atmospheric, genre film about a woman who wills her baby back to life, and then, is forced to make one sort of bodily and mental sacrifice after another. It's not the kind of thing that, you're going to get, the girl from Grey's Anatomy to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those are the people who make it on those lists. So, and of course, every time you go to one of those people and they're not, and they pass, it's a ding. It's people start to lose faith in your project, and maybe we can't do this. And so, you just have to hope that you get through the list of obligatory names, with enough faith remaining in the project that you can start going to the people that you want to go to. And, Jordan is somebody that I have known of for many years. I've known Eli Roth for a long time, since I was 11 years old. And so I've watched him. I watched him go through cabin fever. I watched him, go through that whole process. And I remember hearing about Jordan. She's just how she's a pro, and she's I know they became very good friends. And so when it came time to find this the woman for the role of Madeline, we needed someone who you can't. This is a character that's making these, difficult decisions that push the bounds of an audience's sympathy. So it's very important that we had a character, that we had an actor that embodied, this sort of innate empathy, this innate empathetic sort of quality that Jordan has, you know?
Yep.
She's not just sort of your average blue-eyed blonde. She's got some real depth to her, and she's, at the same time, she's very accessible emotionally. She's very, very just difficult not to have a crush on Jordan Ladd, you know? Mm-hmm. She's a very likable person, so she really fit the bill, you know? She was really just what we needed. You know, she gave us exactly what we needed, so... yeah, she was sort of a no-brainer. Because
I would think that, and I mean, she's done her fair share of horror movies even at this young age. I mean, Cabin Fever, you mentioned Hostel 2, Death Proof. How demanding of a role would you say this was for her? I mean, because some people will look at it and go, it's quote just a horror movie, but really, I mean, sounds more like a drama, a heavy drama. How demanding would you say this role was on her day in and day out?
Oh, it's a demanding role for anybody. I mean, this is not a role that you can phone in. It's just, you can't do it. It's impossible, you know. Anyone who's looking for a paycheck, you know, exclusively is not the person for this job. So when I met with Jordan, I mean, my first meeting with her was like 4.5 hours long. The only reason I stopped was because my car was getting towed, and it was long because she was really, really, really moved by the script, and she really, you know, Jordan had sort of, I mean, you do enough horror films, that's all you can do. Jordan loves horror films, you know, because she loves film. She loves good movies, you know. She loves great horror films. She's like a big fan of Repulsion. You know, I mean, she'll talk Polanski with you all day, you know, but like at a certain point, you know, as an actor, you have to go. You can't do just genre films for too long, or you're going to get typecast. So she had sort of sworn off doing horror films. And then she read this Grace script, you know, and she didn't want to read it, but her manager said, look, you really need to read this. This is a really special one, and it's a tough role, but this is not your average horror film. And she read it, and she said, I love this, you know, when you meet with this kid. And, you know, she was just, she was really, you know, she was really committed, you know. I mean, she said, I love the script so much, I don't want to screw it up because I'm not a mom. And I said, I'm not a mom either, you know. And I said, I understand needing to, like, you know, I identify and relate, you know, to the material on a personal level. I totally get that. And I explained to her the way that I identify with this material, you know, as someone who's not a mom and not a woman, is by this core theme, even below the theme of the uncanny bond between a mother and a child. Mm-hmm. You know, I identify with the main theme in the film, even beneath that, which is this idea of needing something that you cannot have. And she smiled because she got it. Mm-hmm. And that was, so we were sort of off to the races from there. But it's a hard role. It's a dark place to live. You know, and while we shot, you know, 192 scenes in 17 9.5-hour days, these 17 9.5-hour days, you know, and that's still, you know,
that's not a lot.
Still a decent amount of time to be living. Well, it's still a decent amount of time to be living in that place.
Yeah,
it is. It's a dark place to live.
Yeah.
And when you have a schedule like that, you have to be all over the map. Like you're shooting so vastly out of sequence. You're shooting like purely for logistical purposes. Like there's no room for, you know, dramatic, you know, luxury in there. And you're not, you know, you don't really have time to rehearse. And there, you know, there's like, it's a really, really, really hard thing to do, and it's a physically demanding role too. It's not like she's, you know, jumping out of windows, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some stunts there, but it's like she has to be. She is mentally and physically deteriorating. Mm-hmm. You know, she's like spiritually deteriorating throughout the course of the movie. And to do that and to create that arc totally out of sequence, and to plunge into those depths is not an easy role for anyone.
Yeah, getting back to your shooting schedule, I mean, you've mentioned a few times now, 17 days, 9.5-hour days. It really, for production purposes, it's not a lot of time. You figure, you know, you're losing an hour a day just for lunch, so now your day is really 8.5 hours.
We're talking 9.5 hours after lunch. So
okay.
Basically, it's a Canadian union show, so you got like an 11-hour day, and then you have an hour lunch, but lunch doesn't start until the last man is through, so that's about a half hour. So you got an hour and a half lunch. So that's the 9 hours.
And I mean, for you as the director and as the writer, trying to keep the pace, and certainly your crew's trying to give you the pace that's needed for this. How, and it's a heavy subject matter. How is it for you, going through these 9.5-hour shoot days?
I mean, I love this shit, man. I live and breathe. The thing I don't like to do is to put a crew and a cast through this. These are professionals, and they deserve an environment in which they can do their best work. And while I find it tremendously thrilling to be under the gun like that, it's not fair to, if you have an actor whose process demands a little more attention or a little more time, you need to be able to give that to them, and you just do that in that schedule. So, I mean, I'm still wet behind the ears with this stuff, but, I know enough to know that you're going to have this problem. There's never going to be enough time or money. If you're shooting a $25 million movie, it probably should be a $60 million movie, So, it's always, you're always going to be up against something, I hear again and again, it never changes. It never changes, Paul. It never changes. Trust me, it never changes. I hear that again and again and again from people at all different levels of this thing. Yeah. And so I think it's sort of like it really becomes a job to not just embrace the limitations, but to exploit them. To allow them to dictate your choices and to sort of embrace them in a way that becomes deliberate instead of fighting them. That starts by your writing. That starts, your first film you're not going to get $25 million for. So, take out the Beatles song and take out the, simplify your car chase or eliminate it. I would not recommend working with I was told a million times not to, you're going to have a baby and a cat in a car crash in your first movie. Are you a fool? And, if you're going to do that, you sort of have to be, you really have to be willing to do a lot of preparation and make up for the lack of time you're going to have on the day. So if we're doing 1 to 3 takes, where basically you need to know exactly what you want. And what I would do is like I said, prepare a manifesto for all department heads. So they have sort of a 213-page master document wherein they'll find, a shot list, sort of a wish list shot list, and then a contingency shot list, and then fine art references and photographic references for mood and for tone and for lighting, and then some, video links where they're necessary or helpful. And we would have individually gone over this stuff and in a group gone over this stuff, to a point where when you show up on the day, you just, there's no discussion. There's no where are we going to put the camera, or what room, or, it's just, you know exactly what you want. It just becomes about going and getting it. How are you going to get it,
What did you learn from this experience as your first time feature film?
Oh man, I learned so much. I really did. I learned a great deal about what I need to have in a contract. Not financially, but creatively. There are certain assurances that, that a film deserves to have, and that are not necessarily going to be the priorities of, a non-creative, but are absolutely going to be the priorities of an audience in the end. So, no matter how much no matter what your feeling is about a financier or the executives involved, there are just certain things that, I will always want assurances, about, how much time I have to color a film or how much time I have to cut the film. And a lot of these things are union things, but if you're not in the union yet, and you're not going to be on your first film, you're not gonna get those assurances unless you have your legal team operating that way. So, learned stuff there. I learned. I had a lot of things sort of validated. A lot of ideas validated in a really in a really sort of hopeful, and positive way. Like, I mean, just the idea that sort of the belief that if you treat a crew, if you treat everyone, with the respect and kindness, with the same respect and kindness, and you set the bar at how hard and how hard you're going to work and how committed you're going to be to a project, that it will all trickle down, and that people will bend over backwards for you, and that it really works that way. I mean, we're not like, everybody in my crew is equally important for completely different reasons. Everybody brings something to the table. If you have people personally involved taking ownership over a project, that is the only way you can do something this ambitious in that amount of time. It just can't happen if people are just there to work. It can't. And it's a miserable environment. Like, we've all worked on shows like that where it's just a job and people just want to go home, or they just want to go get shit-faced at the end of the day, and that's not the world I want to live in, And I don't want to be like, first thing I told this crew was, take ownership over this project. Let this be the show that reminds you why we're all here. We're not. This is the best. This is the best in the world. This is stuff that we've dreamed about forever. Is working on movies. And this crew and this cast really did that, and I think that stuff really shows up on the screen.
Now you get the film done, you're editing it, you're putting it together. Was there any fear in the back of your mind, or maybe, I don't even know if fear is the right word, but was there any concern in the back of your mind that there might be a huge negative reaction to the film because of the subject matter?
No, I don't care. If genre films aren't supposed to be safe. You know what I mean? Like, if we don't have some people, that are really disturbed and distressed by the film, we didn't make a genre film, Mm-hmm. So, whatever, I know that I'm not interested in, this is not a film about politics. I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care what you eat. I don't care how you have your baby. I care about creating a real, consistent, authentic universe from which you cannot escape. I'm very clear that those are, that is my sort of, that's like the operating procedure for me, So if anybody has a problem, believing that's fine. Like, my conscience is clear, and there will always be folks that are just looking for trouble, and that's fine. And that's part of people talking about movies. I found one review where a guy essentially was calling me a homophobe, and I found, another review where a woman was sort of implying that there was, well, actually this was a man implying that I was being misogynistic somehow, and I'm not, and that's cool. I sleep fine at night that way. At the same time, for every one of those sort of folks that are kind of just looking to stir up some shit, you have genuine feminist critics that are really embracing the film. And that's much more important to me. You have women like Kim Boyner, for instance, who's a very, very accomplished, legitimate film critic and a feminist and a mom, and she's a tough critic, but ever since Sundance, she really gets the film, and from a totally, in a very, very much objective way, she's really given us this kind of support that I'm talking about. So,
and that's got to cool. Yeah, that's got to feel good. I mean, that's got to be great to know that you hit the mark.
Oh, it's so important, man. It's, you know, like if you're a man trudging in this territory, like, you really better get it right. You know, you really better do every single piece of footwork you can do, and solicit the input of every single woman that you know that is willing to weigh in on this stuff. You know, in order to make it real. Because if you don't, you know, you're in deep, and you did not do your job. And you know, the fact that the film has been so, you know, completely well received by women and by feminists and by mothers is like, you know, I mean, it's literally it's the first film as long as I can remember that has been just as well received by women as it has by men. You know, like, it really does split right down the middle in the genre, and that's, you know, with horror movies, that stuff just really rarely happens. You know, I mean, somewhere along the line, you've had this convention happen of sort of alienating or neglecting half your audience. You know, and that is not a convention that I have any interest in subscribing to. I mean, from a purely creative standpoint, it's just boring. It's just stupid and predictable and boring, you know, and it's not real. You know, like, the reality is that women are not, I mean, it's like, it's just boring. Like, you know, you see a horror film and every woman is either, you know, is either a whore or a victim or like a male, this masculine fantasy of sort of like, you know, a man in a woman's body who's like a macho action hero, you know? And I think, you know, it's just sort of boring. It's just, you know, like, it's just like just boring gender role stuff, you know, and the reality is just so much more interesting.
Now, you have a very close friendship with Eli Roth. Can you describe how he might have guided you through this process, or what advice he gave you going into this?
Well, you know, my relationship with Eli is much more of a friendship than a business thing. You know, I've known him since I was 11 years old, and he's always been he's always just been a really good friend of me, you know. So, I mean, you know, creatively I'll bounce ideas off of him, and he's always been very straight with me about what he thinks is working, what he thinks isn't working. You know, like, you know, particularly in the short, his brother Gabe cut the short. You know, so during the short, he weighed in a great deal and was very helpful in trimming it down and sort of distilling it to its essential beats. You know, it was you know, I think we probably cut about 2 minutes off of it after we got Eli's notes. The feature, you know, Eli's sort of gotten busier and busier, you know, and you know, so with the feature, you know, short of story notes, you know, and he wasn't as much of a participant, but you know, I mean, just sort of being able to watch someone go through these things before you go through them, it's just a tremendous luxury. It really is, you know. Sure.
You get a look on the inside before you get there yourself. I mean, I can't imagine how invaluable that is.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, no one will ever have to repeat any mistake that, you know, that I make. You know, like, if I, you know what I mean? Like, if there's like a, you know, any opportunity I get, like, to mentor someone, you know, like, I typically jump on it, you know, because I've really lucked out with that stuff myself. You know, I mean, you have to be sort of realistic about it, but,
yeah,
you know, there's no reason that any of us on this journey shouldn't. It's not like it's sort of sad when you see people being secretive about their experience and stuff. You know, it's just like, I think there's a lot of fear tied up in this. It's such a competitive game. You know, it's like the odds are so stacked against you that I think, you know, there's, you know, people engage in some sort of cutthroat, nasty, backstabbing stuff from time to time. But you just sort of gotta let that roll off your back and trust that, you know, folks will either grow up or not, and good folks tend to find each other here, and just like assholes tend to find each other too.
That is true. Now, the film has a website. What would the web address be for that?
Is grace-themovie.com.
And people can go there. They can take a look at a little piece of what they can expect from the DVD, which will be coming out this Tuesday, September 15th. You just heard from the director himself. Paul, I thank you so much for joining me in the graveyard. I wish you well with this release. I think you're going to have a huge hit on your hands, and I look forward to having you back on the show down the road.
And as I put this interview to rest, I would like to once again thank Paul Solet for joining me here on the Graveyard Show podcast. His film Grace comes out on DVD Tuesday, September 15th. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be on the show. It was great meeting him in person at Fango, LA. I look forward to having him back on the show down the road. And as I begin to close down the graveyard, it's time to look at the Friday Night Horror on television. Chiller TV doing 2 premieres this Friday. John Carpenter presents Vampires Los Muertos at 8 p.m., followed by the premiere of Driftwood at 10 p.m. American Movie Classics doing my favorite, a triple feature, starting with Return of the Living Dead at 11 p.m., a little earlier than usual, followed by the remake of The Fly, the 1986 version, at 1 a.m., and Puppet Master at 3 a.m. The Independent Film Channel will be showing the movie The Beast Within at midnight. And, of course, I'd like to remind you that all times are Eastern Standard Time, so if you're watching on satellite and you are in a different time zone, please subtract the appropriate amount of time. Otherwise, you'll miss the movie and blame me. I don't want you to blame me. So, here we are. So what does the future hold for the Graveyard Show podcast? Well, quite simply, the show will be here next week. It will be here the week after, and the week after, and the week after. That is not changing. There will be 3 things that you can expect as Rich starts running things here at the Graveyard Show podcast for me. The first thing is that you can expect, well, a new host or a substitute host. Who that is, I don't know, but I do know that it's not Freak Show, and it's not the ladies. I had to get that one in today. It will not be Freak Show or the ladies. It is someone new and different. So there will be a substitute host while I'm away. The second thing is that you can still expect original interviews on the show, because that's what the show is about. And that's why I'm so happy that Rich is running things here while I'm gone, because he, like I said earlier, he will maintain the integrity of the program. I have no doubts about that. He's a fan of the show, which I'm flattered about. I'm a fan of his show as well. I think he and the ladies do a hell of a job up there with Bordello of Horror. So he will maintain the integrity of the show. He knows the format of the show. He knows the show. So I'm not worried about that at all. So you definitely will expect original interviews with guests. I have an idea of who he's looking to get for the show. I'm not going to drop any names now. I'm not going to put him in that position in case things don't pan out. But he does have original interviews to bring you from here on out while he is running things at the Graveyard Show. And he's also going to be putting together some best ofs. Best of me, the caretaker. Which shows or what he's going to do, I don't know. That's up to him. He's running things while I'm away. Nothing should be changing at all. The only difference is that I just will not be participating for a while. So, Rich will be running the website. So if you were to happen to go to graveyardshow.com to check out the website or listen to the show, it will still be there and it will be updated and running. Or if you are following me on the Twitter account, which is twitter.com/graveyardshow, you will be seeing updates on there as well. Or if you, let's just say you happen to be a part of some of the other websites that I'm associated with, like Horror Malls The Haunt, or Haunt Universe, or All Things Scary, or Scary and Frightening Things, or I'm Terrified of the Dark, or Scary and Frightening Things Doth scare me out of my mind. You get the point. Rich will be updating those, or he will be running them, or he will be dealing with them in some way, shape, or form. Or if you decide to send a show an email, let's just say you decide to go to graveyardshow@gmail.com and send an email to the show. Well, Rich will get that. See how I kind of blended all that together right there? That sounds pretty good. Yeah, nothing else is changing. Everything else is there. It's I will just not be participating. As soon as this podcast is uploaded and taken care of and launched, I will be stepping aside. So I won't be reading emails or any of that stuff. Rich will be handling all that for me. Again, I cannot thank him enough for doing this. It is a lot of work, and he has a ton on his plate already, but he loves doing, entertainment. He loves horror. He loves you guys out there and loves the show. I greatly appreciate it. I cannot thank him enough. I wish him all the best as he runs the graveyard while I'm away. Again, I don't know how long that will be. I will not put a time limit on it. But I will, you will know when the caretaker's returning to the graveyard show, because I will let Rich know, and Rich will let you know. So, I want to thank all of you for listening to the show, downloading the show. I know there are a lot of horror podcasts out there. It means a lot to me that you take the time to listen to the show. I will see you soon, my friends, and, ironically enough, this time I will be joining you as we exit the graveyard. And as we do so, I will remind myself to lock the gate behind us. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time. The Graveyard Show Podcast is a proud sponsor of the 2009 Viscera Film Festival, which celebrates and promotes progressive women filmmakers in the horror genre. Viscera is now accepting films in two categories: women-directed/produced films and women-only productions. Submissions are open until December 31st, 2009. To find out more about the Viscera Film Festival, go to thechainsawmafia.com/viscera for details.
Good evening, friends of the undead. This is the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp freak show.
And I am the diva of dismemberment, mistress of the blade, June the meat cleaver.
Myself, along with the Harlots of Horror, host the online video podcast, Bordello of Horror. Check out all the twisted fun with featured films, news, interviews, reviews, and more.
I personally dare you to step into the bordello at MadisonHorror.com.
That's MadisonHorror.com?
MadisonHorror.com.
Hi, this is Jerry's phone. He doesn't have the right cell service, so he gets no bars out here in the middle of nowhere.
This camping trip isn't too bad, eh? I mean, what can you say against nature, right?
So, when you called warning him about the disappearance and violent death of lots of campers up here in the mountains...
What do you want? I asked the questions.
He didn't get that message. I guess he and his friends will have to find out for themselves.
Where are you now? I don't know. Where are you now? 19 Nocturne Boulevard? www.19nocturneboulevard.com. Where are you now?